This podcast is made possible by VersaPay.
Hello, this is Chitra Balasubramanian, CFO of Circle CI, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to the CFO Thought Leader podcast.
This is episode 885.
But yeah, we're able to get specific customer data. Our challenge is like sometimes we have just too much. How to synthesize it. We are getting much better at becoming more proactive in pricing, so we could get better indications almost near real time where pricing's landing and how to adjust that. A lot of our pricing is FX driven, so pricing's done aligned with how foreign exchange operates in our receive regions. We test things, we see how competitors react, we see how our customers react. But we are now, as a company, operating very tightly.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Robert Mitchell, CFO of Zepz. Robert Mitchell had been sizing up new venture opportunities for PayPal for roughly 3 years when in 2013, the door to an operations and control role swung open. Impressed by Mitchell's financial modeling know-how, Mitchell tells us his then bosses handpicked him to create a framework for launching and monitoring new credit initiatives. For Mitchell, there was no turning back. There would be no second guessing, not even when Mitchell learned his new office was in Brussels. You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. When your accounts receivable automation focuses only on back office tasks, you forget the most important stakeholder, your customers. VersaPay gives you all the tools you need to automate those tasks, plus the collaboration tools to take on everything that automation alone simply can't. This doesn't just increase efficiencies and accelerate cash flow, but also creates a dramatically improved experience for your customers. And as the economy tightens, can you really afford to risk losing customers over an invoice-to-cash process they find frustrating? With VersaPay, clients typically achieve 50% less time managing receivables, 25% faster payments, 30% fewer past due invoices, and 81% customer portal adoption. Learn more about VersaPay's collaborative AR, ERP payments, and cash application solutions at versapay.com/CFO. Hello, we're speaking with Robert Mitchell, CFO of Zepz. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me.
As our listeners know well, Robert, we always begin by asking our CFO guests to look back for us and try to think about some of those experiences they feel really prepared them for the role. And again, you've had so many along the way. We're looking for those experiences that you feel, that made a difference. Helpful. Take a look back for us. What do you see?
Yeah, no, thanks for opening it up. I'd say I started my career out in investment banking as an analyst. It was in a boutique bank called Needham & Company. I was an analyst focused on M&A and equity offerings from 2000 to 03. So it was just as the tech bubble was kind of peaking at that point. But I'd say that job really was my first really job out of university from graduating, and really was a crash course on how to model, be analytical, and really work in a very high, fast-paced environment. So definitely teaching me grit, how to interoperate with senior folks, how to present things on slides. So really just like kind of basic skill work, and also how to navigate through, company financials as well. So it was like very core fundamental, but not so much academic, but more just like kind of trial by fire, being dropped in and working some grueling hours sometimes, 15, 18-hour days at various points.
Where were you based at that time?
New York.
But it looks like in short order, you move around somewhat.
I did. Most of my career has been like kind of a migration west in the U.S. Got my MBA at WashU St. Louis, and then eventually moved to Silicon Valley, around 05. But I would say the other kind of career point for me towards the CFO journey was when I went working abroad in Luxembourg for PayPal. I was assigned to be a credit controller. And I remember when they first came to me with the role, they said, "How would you like to move to Luxembourg?" And I had to look on a map. I knew it was in Europe. It was just a question of exactly where. So I did find it. But it was just an incredible experience because the role that was defined initially is that I was handpicked for it because of the more financial modeling work I was doing on our credit initiatives inside of PayPal. But then I was being asked to do an operational role overseas for it. It's something I've never done before. But they thought, hey, you're a smart guy. You can figure it out. You're proven, executor inside of PayPal. And this was really my first foray. I was there for about 3 years or so, really jumping into more of an operational role instead of, more financial modeling. And it really put me in a position of, how to think through end-to-end processes, how to think through launching a program, but more working with the different operational teams, and also how to lead teams as well. Because beforehand, anyone who starts in either audit or finance, they're usually like individual contributors, not necessarily learning how to lead teams. And that's a giant pivot evolution, I think, that people really need to make. Especially if you're going to go for, the CFO route.
Robert, I like the way how you explained how you sort of headed west, migrated west for your MBA. And there was a pit stop along the way. You pick up an MBA in St. Louis at Washington University. When you get to Silicon Valley, I want to mention that you made an investment in 11 years at PayPal. And when you exit PayPal, you are a business unit CFO. So it was a decade of career years well invested, I would believe. So Tom, I want to ask you about your MBA. And I don't always ask about MBAs and where they go, but I thought this was an interesting choice. And it sort of, as you described, you headed west and got your MBA and continued on west. But why Washington University?
No, it was a well-ranked school. We did have family friends who had, they were big alumni there and had recommended the program to me. I went out to visit it, and that was a great program. It's pretty well known in terms of its finance program, and had a lot of strong connections both to the East Coast and West Coast. So, when I went out there, it made like a lot of sense for me from a fit standpoint as well.
Were you thinking I'm headed to the West Coast even then, or not necessarily?
I was definitely looking for something new. Cisco at the time was recruiting on campus, and just the thought of, wow, maybe the ability to go check out California, see what that's like. And I had been on there once before while I was working with Needham. So I had seen what the Bay Area was like, and it was something of, an adventure, and I like that.
And you do join Cisco ultimately, right? And step into a corporate finance job, or how would you describe the role you take on post MBA?
Yeah. So, I joined Cisco, first in their worldwide channel sales function. So it was more like an FP&A role, and then moved into their M&A finance role. So it was more like kind of a corp dev M&A analyst role as well. So it's more like kind of traditional corporate finance roles inside of a company. And that was, for me, I realized is that I really enjoyed being part of like a purpose-driven company with a product behind it. I like the camaraderie and culture of different teams working together. Because whereas when you're in an audit firm or an investment bank, it's more like you're just heads down, really cranking through a deliverable. Whereas you get to see kind of like how do many teams interoperate, to deliver a service, to customers.
So are you, as you arrive at Cisco, is it, mission complete? I'm a tech finance executive. Is that how you began sort of thinking of yourself? Or
Yeah, I mean, I started my career inside of Needham, started putting me inside of tech. So I had that kind of exposure. And then, I was able to just continue on with it. It was always an interest to me. No specific area per se. But yeah, you kind of, once you're there, you're just kind of like, go with like an industry flow, if you will, of, being in having exposure, to tech.
now, when you join PayPal, you're really FP&A oriented, and your roles not so much controllership is what I mean. It seems like your world was really FP&A, or not.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Mostly my roles traditionally were just more FP&A related. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's why I was bringing up the move I made to Luxembourg. That was the pivot to doing more operational types of roles with finance. I've done a pretty good job in terms of like being the guy that could like, whiteboard an idea, build a financial model, present it, size it, and everything. That pivot that I made, going to Luxembourg started moving me into the realm of like operations, controls, risk management. So that's where I started getting the idea of like, oh, wow, like, building these skill sets along the way could really position me almost really for a CFO role, that I was looking to do. I knew that, I liked, the analytical piece of things. I liked analyzing, companies and financials, and then the ability to like work with teams, influence teams, drive to an outcome, work with multiple stakeholders. That started really exciting me as well. And I started learning that more as I went through my tenure at the Luxembourg bank entity, for PayPal.
I also like to usually ask when someone's put in a decade at a company is what kept you there? And I always hear about opportunities, but at the same time, I don't doubt there were recruiters that approached you and tried to pick you off, or what kept you there? Why? And that was an investment of 10 years. That's quite an investment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, close to a little more than 11. I was always able to. I liked the senior people there. I liked the culture that was built at PayPal, and it was always getting better. When I was there for the first few years, we were part of eBay. New management under Dan Schulman got brought in to spin it out, and I really liked the culture that was being built within the company, and I was constantly being given like new opportunities to what you were saying. But I had mentors inside of PayPal that were starting to give me even more stretch assignments, like the ability to move to Luxembourg for PayPal, coming back and being in a more traditional controllership role that was typically offered to audit, people with audit backgrounds. So the ability to like kind of be inside of a company that allowed me to like get that wide range of experience was really like that. It kept me there. And I like the payments industry. I became pretty proficient with understanding, payments, and also, the credit background as well. So, overall, like it was a great place to be. And it provided a lot of opportunities there.
From what you just shared, just in regards to returning from Luxembourg and how you wanted to step into a role to broaden yourself, to get more experience in perhaps part of the finance function that you hadn't in the past, it sounds like you're already thinking, I want to someday be a CFO. Were you, or again, it looks like you were trying to make certain you touched all the bases before ascending. And I'm wondering if maybe it even happened earlier to you. Maybe you came out of business school saying, I'd like to be a CFO someday. I don't know. But when did it occur to you that both your feet were on the CFO path?
That's a good. I think when I came back from Luxembourg and was able to pivot into the controllership role, because I knew from talking to a lot of people, like, yes, this is a path I wanted to do, and that this is like kind of what I need to start filling in gaps, and having that kind of deep controllership experience in a divisional level is really like what was going to like address a huge piece of that. And I had raised my hand for it, and I was working closely with the CAO at the time, and he gave me the opportunity to go do it. And it was very hands-on. Required a lot of team changes. We were bringing in a new company called Swift Capital. We were selling off a piece of the consumer credit business to Synchrony at the time. So there was a lot of moving pieces that my background lended well to because of the credit experience I had inside of PayPal.
Great, interesting chapter for us, because I think you're revealing that PayPal was willing to develop you in that way, even though there might have been traditionally the typical candidates who would have filled that role might have been a little different from your background. But PayPal was looking to develop its people as well. Makes sense as to why you stuck around. So, as I said, you do become a CFO of a business unit before stepping outside of PayPal. And when you do step outside of PayPal, it's for a CFO role. So the path leads to the preferred destination. So we might have a few more career-related questions for you during the mentoring round, Robert. But right now, let's find out about Zepz. Tell us about this company. What does it do, and what are its offerings today?
Yeah, Zepz is a global cross-border payments company. We operate two brands in market called WorldRemit and SendWave. Its mission statement is a world that celebrates migrants' impact on prosperity at home and abroad. And we do that through offering a digital remittance service. So if you're a migrant worker in, say, the US, UK, Canada, Australia, you're able to send money back home, which markets we typically operate on the receive side. African nations such as Ghana, Kenya, Senegal, Nigeria, or Philippines. We do some Latin America as well. So you're able to, like a Western Union almost, you're able to send money back home. It's either on the WorldRemit side, we do it through our web or mobile experience. SendWave, it's just mobile. But the pricing point is very competitive, typically lower than a Western Union. It's easy, and people are able to have full transparency around fees and pricing that they pay for it.
We know it's a private company, but we always like to ask our guests for an abbreviated history of the company's capital structure. What would you share with us?
Yeah, the company was founded as WorldRemit like 12, 13 years ago or so. It's grown, mainly UK based, grown quite a bit. As a WorldRemit brand, it acquired the SendWave brand in early 21, and through that, we are still a privately held company, VC backed. We are, so what you would call probably a late stage fintech, company. They had tried to go through an IPO process back in early 21. Those market conditions really started pulling back. The management team at the time decided not to. The company was still probably, I would say, immature at the time from an operational standpoint to be a publicly traded company. So we still remain private today, but well capitalized, and profitable as well.
And again, you step in 22, is that right?
Yep. So I stepped in with a new CEO, Mark Leonard. Both of us stepped in together in July of 22. I had worked with Mark at PayPal earlier in my career. He had, after I finished winding down Fast, when I was CFO there, I finished that in June. He had called me up, told me about this role, and he needed someone specifically with an operational CFO background in payments that's done more like governance in Europe, and my background fit really well with what he was looking to do, and also we had worked very closely together, which I now learned as a CFO is that knowing your CEO and having that like strong trust and relationship is almost everything.
Want to understand the chapter then, and I think we have a few clues here. The chapter that you're opening then with your CEO, you're looking to optimize the operations. You're looking to perhaps take the company public if the time is right and the footing of the organization is better established.
Yeah, there's a lot of value behind this company. When Mark and I dropped in 22, you really had it. While World Remit had acquired Sendwave, they were really operating totally separate. So when we came in, we essentially were rebuilding a lot of the management team and the strategy vision of the company. And only like 4 or 5 months ago, it pushed integration of what should have been done towards close. And it's been going pretty well. But our mandate is like we don't need the quick exit. Our board is looking for us to just realize the value and continue building what is a very strong company, to realize the value that's behind it.
Well, I'd say PayPal was not a small organization when you were there. Really, it grew quite a bit. But the organization you left was quite sizable and no doubt pretty sophisticated in terms of data and the financials, in terms of visibility, being able to see deep into the organization. Are you seeing all the numbers that you're accustomed to seeing as you operate a business? Can you share with us and tell us a little bit about your lines of sight and the numbers that are top of mind for you? And, what are you looking at regularly?
Yeah, I get really good access, to data. I'd say, we're looking at building more robust, forecasting tools. But as we said, company is profitable. And our run rate from last year is about 450 million. And we produced I think we could probably disclose it. 24 million of EBITDA numbers, and we feel really comfortable in terms of where the growth trajectory is right now. We are looking to both grow top line and profitability, but we are also now tipping the company into operating cash flow positive.
How do you, your lines of sight, let's talk about non-financial metrics. Are you able to see customers' activity? Are you able to understand when you're experiencing a good deal of customer churn in one part of the world and try to understand it and respond to it?
Yeah, we have really good visibility on what we call a corridor level. So it's like, a send country and map to a receive country. So like, there could be multiple lines of like, how it all works. But yeah, we're able to get specific customer data. Our challenge is like sometimes we have just too much, how to synthesize it. But we are getting much better at becoming more proactive in pricing, so we could get better indications, almost near real time, where pricing's landing, and how to adjust that. A lot of our pricing is FX driven, meaning like foreign exchange. So pricing's done aligned with how foreign exchange operates in our receive regions. So there's a lot of like we test things. We see how competitors react. We see how our customers react. But we are now, as a company, operating very tightly around the different types of, I would say, metrics that we're looking at in terms of monthly revenue targets, gross margin. And then also below that, we do look heavily at costs as well. As we're bringing the two companies together, we're continually looking at optimizing costs. So not doing just massive like headcount rifts, but like strategically going into all different areas and making sure we're optimized across. The good thing is that as we brought really both brands together, there's really great things that each one does very well. And there's other things that, each one doesn't do very well. So we're able to bring like best of breed of, culture, pricing strategy, operating cadence, and bring it into like a unified company.
Can you give us some maybe background on the deal? When was it completed?
Yeah, the deal was done in early 21. They were kept separate, for quite some time. So I think, but overall, they both have very strong brands. So a lot of questions we get asked, like, are you going to like sunset one brand or keep one other? No, we're going to keep both brands. They do operate sometimes side by side in the same markets, but remittances is such a big game. We don't need to be number one or number two share. We just need to kind of continually grow our position because the market is that big. Remittances is about a $1.5 trillion size market, growing 2-3%. We haven't seen demand for the service abate from any of the economic turbulence we see. In fact, remittances are a much bigger deal for migrant workers. We see money being sent home for utility bills, medical bills, family needs, education. So there's almost like recurring revenue streams when you could get a customer that's not just loyal, but that you're giving them a really good price, given what's in the market today, offering a seamless experience. You're able to keep that customer with recurring transactions. So it's a really great scalable model that you could build on top of.
We talk a little bit about how you're organizing the finance function, and you stepped in, and have you added some talent? Have you reorganized things in some way?
Well, I think, no, it's a good question, Jack. I mean, what we're trying to do is, I would say, consolidate. I had like a brand from Sendwave Legacy doing just controllership. They're on a separate ledger. Then I have World Remit and the consolidation done on another ledger. So I think the integration process will continue, but more on the system side. Getting us onto a single ledger, wanting more automation around some of our treasury wiring process, because a lot of things are still manual. I mean, it's easy to be manual when you're a startup. You're kind of like a little more bootstrapped, but we do have a lot of scrutiny, not just from auditors, but regulators in the EU, in the UK, state regulators, US side. So we have to become more robust. And even though we're not like aiming for it specifically, I call it with the team IPO readiness. Like whether it's an exit, that's a sale, or an exit even that's a public offering, or we continue to grow inorganically through acquisitions, is that I am wanting the finance function to be IPO ready, within a 2-year time frame.
What about just in the current economic environment? How does it impact your business? One would imagine there's an extra level of complexity here somehow with migrant workers sending funds home to different parts of the world, all economies impacted differently, perhaps. Don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen demand drop. If anything, we continue to grow. Our customers now have more pricing options and different competitors they can use. So a lot of times they price check us against like, well, who's offering like a better price today or whatever else. But there is some level of, I would say, competitiveness we need to keep at pricing. We've brought the World Remit pricing strategy a bit more in line. Beforehand, it was a little bit elevated. But we haven't seen anything kind of shift in terms of inflation or recession. We did see when the U.S. dollar was very strong in late Q3, Q4, that was starting to impact our year-end results more because we translate everything back to a USD. So it's just a stronger U.S. dollar making results overseas a bit weaker. But in terms of overall velocity usage, we haven't seen abatement with it. Remittance is a great industry in the sense that it's continually going to be an important part of not just migrant workers' lives in some of our major send regions, but also it plays a vital role in getting liquidity and currency into some of the developing markets that we work with as well.
All right. Is this would you characterize the company as remote first, or is it a hybrid organization, I would imagine?
Yeah, I think Sendwave was born remote first before the pandemic. And I'd say right now, I would say we are somewhat remote, maybe leaning more towards hybrid. The overall HQ is London. I'm based in New York. I make the hours work. It's not too bad. It's only UK being 5 hours, ahead. But I still operate with a lot of external investors and also banks that are New York based. So the board was okay with me staying, in New York. But we are a global organization. We have a huge customer service outfit out in the Philippines. We have quite a bit of talent that we're building up in South Africa. We have a really good talent base also out in Krakow, Poland. So we are somewhat remote, and we don't have our HQ is a WeWork, so we're not investing in the big office or whatever thing else like that. And we're finding you don't really need to. Employees, we have budget set aside for meetups. We just did a senior leadership meetup in Morocco, which is a key area for us. And that's received well, but you don't really need to have all the frills that you saw in these offices beforehand. That's not really what employees are valuing at this point.
For many companies that went remote during the pandemic, it's been sort of a learning experience, and some of them have sought to help their managers learn how to manage again in terms of managing their remote teams better, more effectively. As a leader, have you, and I don't know, in the past at PayPal, I imagine you were working from an office most days, but maybe I'm wrong. But as a leader, have any insights to share in regards to how to lead remotely, how to manage remotely, how to be more impactful, maybe as you and I talk across a video screen, what have you?
Yeah. I think, just starting from where you were, I was at PayPal and was very office centric, and leading up to the pandemic, I remember when it did happen, we had to go remote. We weren't sure how it was going to work. And we were able to do the monthly close pretty well. I think it was a year-end close, and we were in front of our screens. We were already using Microsoft Teams at the time. We weren't as heavy into individual video, but we started to make it work. And all of our accounting data was cloud-based, so it seemed to be working okay. Where I think I've started to learn in terms of how to lead, because most of my team is somewhat UK based, but I fill up my calendar. I do touch spaces with my different teams, so I don't operate behind email. I try to set up just small sessions, checking in with folks, seeing what's going on. I do try to make trips, to our UK site and other work sites as well, to build the relationships. But it's more just being available. But on the flip side, though, I think everybody has to be very, I would say, strict, or in terms of, discipline, I'd call it. That's probably a better word, in terms of boundaries. Like, it's easy when you're working at home. It's like the days could just blend into themselves. So I think we, as a company, we've gotten very good at, like, things do drop off, but sometimes we'll jump back on. As an exco, we have like Slack as well, so we're able to like get in touch with each other if needed. So I think employees develop their own rhythm and everything. But yeah, I mean, having the video touch bases, I mean, it's important, but also making sure that the video touch bases are not all transactional. Meaning that I'm not getting in touch with you because like I need to understand a number, or what's this report about? It's like sometimes it's just like one-on-ones, like let's just talk, catch up, find out what's going on, and that's like how I try to typically lead too. I'd like to understand what motivates somebody, what are they driven by, what's their purpose, what do they want, what their day-to-day, what's it pointing towards, what are things that they're interested in, because that way when I get a better understanding of that, we're able to connect and click better. But also that, if something does come up in the organization for an opportunity, I know that person is interested in that.
Great. Thank you for that. We're going to jump to our finance strategic moment question, where we ask guests just for a single moment of insight that they experienced that allowed them to identify maybe an opportunity, might have been a risk, something they stayed away from, something they pursued. When we ask you for a finance strategic moment, what comes to mind?
Yeah, Jack, I'd say when I made that pivot to PayPal Luxembourg and I was in a more of an operational role, that's where it really dawned on me is that finance is not just like, in spreadsheets, but it's really like almost overseeing like an end-to-end operation. And for a CFO to feel comfortable with like the output of numbers and everything, you really have to have good visibility oversight around how your operations or teams function end to end to produce the results, and where does data come from, and how is it mapped to all the way downstream to when it's produced for financials. So having that end to end view and that discipline to build out mapping of it, the controls, who's doing what, that for me as a CFO is like the biggest thing. Because without the controls and everything, then you have no assurances as to your results are accurate. So that dawned on me when we were rolling out the UK consumer credit project. We had built the business case, make sure the numbers made sense. We knew that there was a lot of opportunity there of offering consumer credit to PayPal UK users inside the PayPal wallet. But then when we launched it and we saw that there was operational failure, statements weren't going out, we started seeing min pay due calculations done incorrectly. So there was all these like little failures that were happening along the way. And it was very clear to me, it's like, to launch something, it's not just like, all right, go, because it looks good on a spreadsheet. It's like, no, you got to like kind of line up all the different pieces. And, at least from a finance function, to make sure that from a control standpoint, does your data hold up? Does your payment flows, are they operating correctly? Do you have the right like checks along like a process flow that things are operating correctly? And then do you have the right signals that could come back to you if something's not working correctly? So it's that kind of oversight and end-to-end view was the big aha for me, particularly in the payments world. And, I'm applying the same type of rigor mentality, and we're bringing that inside the company as well.
Hello and welcome to 60-second stories from CFO Thought Leader. Looking back on their career-building years, few finance leaders ever forget the first time they presented to a board of directors. Present-day CFOs tell us that the penetrating stares from across the boardroom table remain locked in time, evergreen in their memories forever. For Jim Young, the stares that remain evergreen were not cast across a boardroom table, but instead a room populated by hundreds of his company's employees. Young says a finance presentation he gave a decade or more ago remains memorable because of what followed it. There were questions. Lots of them. However, Young tells us it was not his analysis or the inclusion of a new metric that the audience found so engaging. Instead, Young tells us it was simply because his presentation connected the dots. You'll hear that story and much more on episode number 876 of CFO Thought Leader, featuring CFO Jim Young of Coalition. Remember, the future of finance is listening.
Well, we'll jump to our mentoring round, where we get to ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We want you to look back again, and we're looking for sort of a leadership moment in time when you had a lot of responsibility all of a sudden. Maybe it was stepping into this role, although that was just a short while ago, or maybe it was when you stepped into the business unit CFO role. But we're wondering if you could go back in time and just tell yourself. And again, obviously the intent of this question is to help new leaders. When you were a new leader, what would you go back in time and tell yourself? There was something you wish you knew, or you focused things differently. Anything?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Jack. I'd say as you're a new leader, is that it's no longer about you in terms of a deliverable or getting credit. Your job as a leader is of service. You're of service to the team that you oversee. You're responsible for their day-to-day and career development as well, and making sure that they're in the right role. So I'd say is that your job as a leader is to get out of the doing and more just being on the elevated side and building the relationships to make sure your team has the right resources, they're pointing in the right direction, but also that they're getting the recognition and exposure so that they can develop as well. So there's actually someone had a mentor had pointed me to it. It was a really good book. It was by let me look it up here. It's called The Next Level by Scott Elbin. It was a great book about how to make that transition from an individual contributor to a new emerging leader. And I often, people who are making that pivot, I often give that recommendation is have a read through it, because it really just kind of simplifies. It's what your new perspective should be. And so every time, now you step into a role, it's that, how does my team source the answer? How does my team kind of operate through the day? Are they pointed in the right direction? Are they growing? The well-being overall of my teammates. That's your job as a leader now. So in the CFO role, there's a lot of high pressure, just in terms of numbers, rigor of cadences that you need to put through. So you're making sure is that do you have the right folks there? Are you getting the right data intel? And what can you do to help? But as a CFO, though, you're not in the day-to-day. You have to be more, it's interesting, you kind of drop in deep with the teams, see what's going on, but also you come up very high working with the board and CEO, looking on the horizon strategically as well.
Thank you for that. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side for us. We're wondering if you're known for some sort of habit or part of a daily routine that you have over time. And we're looking for something that sets you apart. So we can't have you tell us you make lists or, or you clean your desk off at the end of the night. We are looking for something maybe a family member would point out to us. This is just the way, he's always done it. That's what Robert is. Anything?
Yeah, no. It's a good question. I think sometimes I get the comments back. It's you're not are the typical CFO. I try to relate to people where I want to build the relationship where I understand where folks are coming from. A lot of times, I try to add levity to situations and I know that everyone is very stressed, and always like, rushing everything. I try to create like a safe environment, if you will, at least for my folks and everything. And I always tell them, like, if I'm not hearing the bad news, I assume it's going on and you guys aren't telling me. Right. So I create an environment where I want to hear like things that aren't working, whereas I think sometimes leaders are just like, nope, only positive news or whatever else. Like, like I don't mind hearing the problems. It's just that as long as, and a mentor taught me this at PayPal, it's that, just owning the problem, identifying it, owning it, and coming up with a solution. Right. So, and I think, you build that culture of trust and safety. I think it goes a long way. So that's something maybe I do a little bit differently in terms of, I try to build that relationship with every touch point I have, with folks. So.
I know we always like to ask for a book recommendation. You just mentioned The Next Level. I'm wondering if would you emphasize that one, or is there another one you'd like to share with us as well?
That's a good like kind of leadership one. I do like to read a bit about history as well. I think Ray Dalio's book, that recently came out on like investment cycles and how history moves in cycles as well. That's very interesting. There was another book similar to it called The Fourth Turning, where it talks about how America moves in these cycles of like 80 years. So I love to like read about history because you see patterns emerge, not so much identical, but things do shift in waves. And I think sometimes you have to put that in perspective, is like kind of where are we at as a as a company, and like where are we sailing to, and like kind of what's kind of emerging or waiting on the other side of things, more from a macro standpoint, because it's quite easy to get caught up in headlines, news, different volatility. But it's that when you're in a leadership role, is that you have to like kind of navigate a lot through that. So the more you could kind of put the noise in perspective of patterns that are emerging, it's like, oh, okay, this starts to make sense. The more at ease you feel, and like you don't get sidetracked by any noise, out there.
Well, thank you for those. We're up to our final question, where we'll ask you to look forward finally, and we're wondering what your priorities are as CFO over the next 12 months, just the next 12 months.
No, I'd say, I definitely am going to be looking to automate a bit more. We've created roles within my leadership team specific for transformation, where we're bringing in a bit more investment into, our ledger system. As I said, automating some of our wiring operations as well. So that automation is a big priority. I'd say, our data analytics, a lot of times, a lot of data gets circulated around, the company, but it's having like a single source of truth, and getting better at looking at, forecasting intra-month. So that's another kind of key aspect of it. But it's also like optimizing. I think, as we're looking at, bringing these our teams together, in a lot historically within the finance function was just throw headcount at problems. And I think, we don't need to be doing that. It's, working smarter, but how do you deploy technology, to automate a bit more and get more controls in your environment.
Robert, we appreciate the time. So thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.